And here's the host of the show, the Cowgirl Esquire, Suzanne Sherman with the Wasatch Report.
Welcome, everybody, to the Renegade Rambler Radio Network, otherwise known as the R3. And as the intro said, this is the Wasatch Report, and I am the Cowgirl Esquire, also known as Suzanne Sherman. This is the debut show of a brand new show in the lineup of the Renegade Rambler Network, and we're just going to have a good time today. And Jeff Johnson's going to be joining me. We became friends from when I was doing another show, and we decided that we were going to take advantage of the technology available today, where you can have the option of not listening to the mainstream media, and you don't have to be lectured or talked down to by those that have gone through these elite schools and broadcast journalism studies and listen to their social justice rants and raving, and have people like MSNBC say that they are going to control what we think. We are free thinkers. We are seekers of liberty, defenders of justice, and we want to bring a message to you that just comes from our hearts. We're normal people. Jeff Johnson and Daniel Bailey are my good friends that founded this network. Daniel's a truck driver. Jeff is in law enforcement, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. I used to practice law, and we're just going to talk to you about some of the relevant subjects today. We're going to focus about on prepping and survivalism, some current events, but also from a historic perspective on some of the issues that are affecting our lives and threatening our liberty today. I think the motto of the network is 18th century thoughts for 21st, or 18th century ideas for 21st century ideas, our thinkers. So we'll work on memorizing that. But that being said, I want to introduce, if you're not familiar with Jeff Johnson, I want to introduce him today. Jeff, I want you to come on and join me right now.
Thank you, Suzanne.
You know, when you had your show, The Paradigm Shift, you are on, I believe, Saturday nights. We have been discussing this past week about some activities that law enforcement, and I believe it's in Hartford County, Maryland, is engaging in under the auspices of keeping us safe. Is this something that you notice is a common trend, that we are experiencing a significant loss of liberty, all under the auspices of keeping us safe? A little bit of background on this story here. There's a post on Facebook from the Hartford County Sheriff's Office where they're talking about deputies with the community policing unit conducted an outreach detail in a neighborhood to help spread the word of how critical it is to lock your car. It is the best deterrent to keep yourself from becoming a victim. So they're explaining how crime has gone down in that area, with the one exception, and that's property theft and vehicular break-ins. So their solution to this, rather than focusing on those engaging in the criminal activities, is to encroach upon people's private property and physically determine whether or not vehicles are locked if they're secured. Well, you know, here's the interesting thing. First and foremost, they're calling this a policing unit. They are engaging in an outreach, so to speak. So they go onto people's private property. Jeff, how many cars can you tell are locked just by looking at them?
None.
So how do you think they can determine whether or not a vehicle is locked?
Well, they have to trespass on the property, and then they have to physically grab the handle and pull the handle and open the door. So
this is, again, an activity where they are coming onto our property. There is no warrant here. They are touching our property, putting their hands on our property. What do you think would happen if the door opens, or they see something in the car that perhaps somebody should not have, according to legislative fiat, like say a marijuana pipe or something else, or say they open this car and they smell marijuana. Do you think they're going to just close the door, leave a note, hey, your car was unlocked, and go their merry way? Or do you think an arrest is going to ensue?
Well, I would suspect, and I don't know because I'm not there, but I would suspect that now they're going to say they have probable cause to get a dog, and the dog's going to do a search on the car, and they're going to find whatever they're looking for.
So
that would be my. Why else would you open the door? Why would you go there to do this? It's not about public safety.
And see, one of the questions, or one of the comments, because I had a discussion going on this on my Facebook page, and somebody commented, well, just lock your cars, people. You shouldn't have a problem with police officers coming on your property. If your cars were locked and you just did what you were supposed to do, you don't have to worry about them intruding upon your property and getting into your personal effects, which is a vehicle. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm going to read Article 1, Section 8 from the Pennsylvania Constitution. Now, I know this doesn't apply to Maryland, but where Daniel and I live in Pennsylvania, this would certainly apply. Security from searches and seizures. Section 8. The people shall be secure in their persons, houses, papers, possessions, a car is a possession, from unreasonable searches and seizures, and no warrant to search any place or to seize any person or things shall issue without describing them as nearly as may be, nor without probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation subscribed to by the affiant.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, you know, we have this big discussion about these 18th century ideas all the time about the Bill of Rights, and we've had you on shows talking about the Bill of Rights and how now people are trying to apply them to the states. Well, I don't need it applied to the states because Pennsylvania has the exact same words.
So, you know, and the question I want to address now that came from my listener was, according to the fruits of the poisonous tree doctrine, wouldn't any evidence taken as a result of this outreach be suppressed, not admitted into evidence? And what that means is the Supreme Court had ruled that any evidence seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment, the remedy would be, rather than any kind of punishment against the police officers, the appropriate remedy would be that the evidence seized as a result of this encroachment violation of a Fourth Amendment right would be that the evidence would be suppressed. It would not be admitted against the accused. So my point is, these theories, while they sound abstract, are adhered to, are put into operation by human beings. Human beings are not infallible. So this theory now would have to be interpreted by a human being, a judge. So a judge would hear the arguments of the defense, who would put forth what I just said about the fruits of the poisonous doctrine. While this evidence was seized without probable cause, the police officer had no reason when he checked this car door to suspect that there would be, for instance, drugs present or a firearm present. So therefore, any evidence seized as a result therefrom cannot be admitted into evidence, say a firearms charge or a drug charge. The prosecution, however, could say, well, this wasn't really a search. They were involved in a community outreach, and this was in plain view. They saw a marijuana pipe, or when it turned out the vehicle was unlocked, They could smell marijuana, and then we have what they call the connection between the violation and the collection of evidence was, I think the term we used in law school was so attenuated as to dissipate the taint, meaning that the evidence was no longer tainted. So can you say concretely which way it's going to wind up? No, you really can't. So that's the danger of a policy like this. It can turn into really a fishing expedition. And it also brings us into another question, and this is something I want to do a show about as well, and that's jury nullification. So now you're sitting as a juror on a case like this. For instance, the officer checked to see if the door was unlocked. It was, and he could smell marijuana, or he saw a firearm under the seat once he had opened the door. You as a juror now, according to jury instructions, if you find that this evidence has been admitted to be used against a defendant, and if it's one of the elements of the crime of which he's being charged, you have no choice but to find this individual guilty. So as a juror, you could still say, you know what, I don't like how this was taken. I'm not going to convict under these circumstances. So that's something that we're going to explore further. But I think this is a very, very slippery slope. Where do you draw the line on them checking to see if we're safe? I did a show, I had an attorney, Nicholas Somberg. I don't know if you remember that one. He is an attorney in Michigan. Now, in the state of Michigan, it is illegal to leave your vehicle running. It was below freezing, and he had it running in his driveway on private property off the street. So they could bring a toddler and his girlfriend in the car. This gentleman that was accused of running the vehicle unattended, it was on his private property. And he was charged. And what Nicholas argued in court was it's a very short step for, let's say the car's in a garage and the garage door's open. Is an officer now going to venture from your driveway into what we call the curtilage of the home? The garage is attached to your home. And then cite you for that, or then check, is he going to go into your garage to see if your vehicle is secured? And the prosecution said that was just an absolutely egregious overreach, a stretch of the imagination that they would do such a thing. Is it really, though?
Well, in this case, they're physically walking onto a property. I mean, they weren't invited. They are cloaking it in public safety, but really, what's the public safety? If my vehicles are always locked. I don't care. I live in the country. There's no one nearby, but I lock my vehicles. It's a habit being in law enforcement. I lock my vehicles. If I didn't and someone robs me, who's responsible for that? That's me. It's my property. It's not the police officer is not responsible for me not locking my vehicle. And if I don't want to lock my vehicles, well, it's on me. I have to replace what was stolen. It's not any of their business if I lock or don't lock my vehicle.
Right. But what we also have to focus on is it really is on the person that is doing the illegal behavior. So if somebody's out there and they are burglarizing vehicles, it's not my fault that they got mine. I am personally responsible for keeping my stuff safe, but criminally, no. And this is, what we're seeing now, and this is what I was figuring out when we're going through law school, because, again, you have to just get over the fact that in law school, you are taught about the incorporation doctrine. They never mention, but the Constitution applies to every single case that we discussed in there. And we get into the Fourth Amendment, you hear about all these exceptions to the requirement of a warrant. And the overwhelming majority of them are all to facilitate the jobs, to make the jobs easier for law enforcement. And
well, you look at the DWI checkpoints. In my opinion, they're unconstitutional because I'm driving down the road doesn't mean I'm committing a crime. If they see me swerving all over the road and I'm committing a crime, then pull me over. But just to willy-nilly search every vehicle because they can, and now the Supreme Court has given them cover. They said they can search every car. We don't have any right to any privacy because we're on a public road.
Yeah, and as long as they stop everybody, there's no profiling. The politically appointed lawyers and their government issued black dresses said it's okay, and now everybody just accepts that as gospel. And that's something we need to get away. We need to get away from. But again, we have this overreaching and the facilitation of their jobs to solve crimes when we are really, our liberties are really suffering at this. I mean, imagine not being able to have your car running in your own driveway so you could warm it up. Are you supposed to stand out there in the cold? Now we're also seeing a textilizer. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Oh, I might have. Go ahead.
Okay. This is a device that you will take and hook your cell phone up to if you are pulled over or if you're in an accident. And a police officer, I saw the gentleman that invented this interviewed when I was in California last week. And what he says, look, it's okay. We're not going to look at what you wrote, but what we're going to do is just see what you did online if you were in an accident. So we'll do a demonstration. So they had the reporter driving his car around a parking lot, and he's going on Facebook and Snapchat and checking news, made a phone call. Well, they plugged it into this little device, and it showed everything he did. They said, we just checked sweeping. That's all we checked. But it said he was on Facebook. It checked Snapchat. It said he was on a phone call. It said he answered and returned a text.
Yeah, I did. Yes, I do remember this. I did a show on this one.
Okay, now the next step is this is going to be, and I when was watching this, and I said, I know exactly where they're going. They're going to make this mandated, just like they've done submitting to a breathalyzer. If you are pulled over and you did not submit to a breathalyzer, you will lose your license automatically. Now they were talking about, and they did mention this in the interview, if you fail to submit to the textilizer, legislators are working on making that an automatic suspension. And who do you think is going to be bribing, shall I say, legislators into making this come to fruition? I don't know, maybe the people that sell this stuff?
Well, it is, again, that slippery slope. I mean, it is, well, it's like the seatbelt checkpoints. Mm-hmm. So we have a police officer under the guise of checking seatbelts, doing felony stops because he sees something in the car. I mean, it's just,
well, we saw
never
another,
stops.
It
never stops.
They had police officers dressed as road construction workers, and there was a traffic jam because there was road construction going on. Vehicles were stopped on the road in traffic. These officers were walking back and forth, and if they saw somebody holding their cell phone, operating their cell phone, they were pulled over and informed what they were doing. So your car is now becoming a mobile surveillance unit on yourself, just like our cell phones are. We know that. But I mean, is there going to be any place, this is now that they're saying is distracted driving is going to be the next drunk driving, meaning the next opportunity to make a lot of money.
Yep. Well, Suzanne, we're about a minute out. If you had something you want to tie up there.
Well, again, like I said, what we see, what the consistent pattern is the use of rhetoric to keep us safe. I mean, obviously, we know people die when a driver is distracted or using their cell phone, but is the answer to stopping these injuries or fatalities a carte blanche opportunity for law enforcement to spy on us and for us to have to surrender our privacy in the vehicle, whether or not an officer is looking inside our car? Sometimes they do this from elevated vehicles, buses or trucks, or if we're stopped in traffic. Is that really worth what they are trying to prevent. And, when you have these debates, you hear people say, well, I know somebody that was killed. Everything that supports these arguments is ad hominem, and people are they're letting themselves get run by emotions. Anyway, when we return, we're going to talk about response times and getting into the topic we planned, which is first aid.
This is the Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. Looking for a new custom camo dress or scarf? Tail Gunner Apparel. Looking for bath and body products for women and men? Tail Gunner Apparel. Looking for bed scarves and custom home products? Tail Gunner Apparel. Look awesome and feel even better. Tail Gunner Apparel on Facebook or at tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com. That's tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com.
Made love and then you cried. Remember when?
Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers.
You're as cold as ice. You're willing to sacrifice our love. You never take advice. Someday you'll pay the price. I know. I've seen it before. It happens all the time.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. I'm your host, Suzanne Sherman, also known as Cowgirl Esquire. This is the Renegade Rambler Radio Network, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. Jeff Johnson's joining me today. He's one of the co-founders of the network, and we have been spending the first segment talking about how we are losing our liberties under the auspices of public safety. We were discussing how police and sheriff's officers in a county in Maryland were actually going onto private property to determine whether or not vehicles were locked in the interest of crime prevention and preventing theft of vehicles. And what we wanted to do now is have a segue into response times, because we do want to discuss first aid and first aid kits, because oftentimes we cannot, there's a difference between immediate responders and first responders. And Jeff, I know that you are in law enforcement and you are also a paramedic. Give a quick, a little bit of a background on your experience in that area.
Well, about 20 plus years ago, I became a firefighter, EMT, and within about 2 years, I became a paramedic. And I kept being a paramedic for 12, 14 years until I made the switch over into state law enforcement. And I have let my paramedic go. I could get it back any time if I wanted it, but I've let my certification slip. The knowledge is still stuck in my noggin, but I just don't have the cover of the crown anymore. The crown won't let me practice as a paramedic.
I want to get into response times, and I'm going to give a couple quick examples before we get into the first aid aspect. But from a criminal point of view, and a potential victim point of view, when we had first moved into the country, when I was still married, I had been a city girl, and we moved out into this place that was in the middle of nowhere, and I was not a firearms owner at the time, and our burglar alarm went off in the middle of the night, and I was convinced that somebody was trying to break into the house. I called 911. I was absolutely terrified, convinced that we were in the midst of a home invasion. It took over 20 minutes for the sheriff to come, and one of the reasons I felt comfortable living where I did was the outpost there, where the sheriff's department office was only a mile or two away from me. So why would it take so long for them to get there? Another incident I want to quickly bring up is a friend of mine in Los Altos was in a bank and was present during an armed robbery. And what she couldn't understand was the police station in Los Altos was just 2 blocks away, yet it took over 17 minutes for them to arrive, long after the perpetrator had left the scene. And what people don't understand is just because you're close to a station doesn't mean that you're going to get assistance regular on a very prompt matter, because they are out and they could be anywhere in that jurisdiction at that time, and it's going to take a while for them to get to you. Do you have any comments, Jeff? Is your mic off? I can't hear you, Jeff.
Sorry. There we
There
go.
you go.
I've been sitting here trying to deal with a little technical problem with the show. So I really missed almost all that, Suzanne, because I'm dealing with the board. I'm trying to do double duty. I'm trying to be a guest and I'm trying to be the producer at the same time. And there is a little technical issue that I'm having and I'm trying to figure out. So could you just kind of just, I'm sorry, I really am.
No, we had discussed this before when we were chatting, and it was about what my friend that was involved in the armed robbery. And when I was living out in the country in California, it took about 20 minutes for the sheriffs to arrive. When I was under the impression that we were in the midst of being burglarized in our home in the middle of the night. So what I wanted to do was transfer this over to our plan topic, which was first aid, because oftentimes we can't get help as quickly as we need to. Now, these examples I gave obviously were police issues, but we also have medical emergencies and police, and we're not going to get the help as quickly as one. Here's an example where I had one in my home here. I actually had to use the Heimlich maneuver on somebody that was at our property here, and it took about 20 minutes, 25 minutes for somebody for help to get here. Now, that would have been too late had we not been able to clear that airway.
Right. And now I know where we're going with this, because I shared an article with you about response times. A police department, they had to set a goal for 8-minute response times in this city for critical, ongoing violent attacks or violent crimes. And a guy had a home invasion, and when the guy left, he called the police because the guy had a gun to his head, and he kept calling him back and saying, "When are the police getting here?" And the lady just finally said, "Well, we have a 16-minute response time, we hope, for any crime that's been committed that isn't ongoing anymore." So he could have been waiting hours. And I think, per the article, he did wait a significant amount of time, about an hour maybe. And during the show prep, I started talking about that court case the Supreme Court heard, and I don't remember the year. A lady was being assaulted in her apartment, was able to get away from the person assaulting her, and dialed 911, and the police didn't come for, I don't remember the specifics. It was a long time, perhaps an hour. And the assault continued on and on because they didn't show up. Well, she sued the city. It was Washington, D.C. And the Supreme Court finally ruled, when it got to the Supreme Court, that the police have no duty to respond. Well, that leaves this person on their own for hours. And that led us to this whole discussion of first aid, because look what's happening in the world. I mean, this police officer was stabbed in the neck in Michigan. We had a congressman shot on a baseball field. So who's going to take care of these people until responders can get there? And I'm going to give you a little dirty secret. As a paramedic, before I was in law enforcement, I would not be, when that congressman wasn't shot, I would stage somewhere nearby and wait for law enforcement to clear the scene. So that means even though I may be within a minute or two of that scene, I may be 30 minutes until I'm on that scene, or longer, until they can make sure there's no other people, no explosive devices, whatever they have to do to make that scene safe for me to come in and pick up people. So who's going to take care of these people? Who's going to be the immediate responder? And that's where we got started on this whole subject.
So let's break this down a little bit. I think it's always important to have some sort of first aid available, but obviously we're not going to take a huge medic bag around with us everywhere we go. Here, I have it broken down into what I have at home, what I have in the vehicle, what I have even in a little carry-on bag when I'm out shopping. So let's break this down a little bit, and also let's give the a discussion on the difference between a first aid kit and an IFAC.
All right. Well, first aid kit can be everything. And in your house, you're going to have everything. You're going to have their Band-Aids and moleskin, and you're going to have everything you need in your house. I mean, because your house stays there, and you don't have to carry the stuff around. So you can buy everything in the pharmacy that you need. You can have everything. So when you get into your car, that's going to have to get a little smaller. You're not going to have everything under the sun there. So when you're traveling, you can have a first aid kit in your car that's pretty well stocked. You can have Band-Aids and, again, moleskin and triple antibiotic. You're going to carry a lot more in your car because it's carrying the weight. You don't have to carry it. And then when you're going to carry-on bags or something that you carry in the store, that's when you're kind of getting down into, you're going to really focus on things that are necessary to keep someone alive immediately. And that's the difference between a first aid kit, something to take care of boo-boos, and an IFAC, which is to take care of serious injuries and trauma.
What does IFAC stand for? IFAK?
It's individual first aid kit.
Okay.
And it rose from the military. The military, every soldier carries an IFAC. So what happens is you have a medic in a unit, and he's have a big pack, and he has all kinds of stuff in it, and he's carrying a lot of weight. Trust me, I've seen one of these medic packs, and the medic is carrying a lot of stuff. But he can't, if everyone else is carrying stuff, when they gets to a wounded soldier, he takes their IFAC and he uses that IFAC to treat that patient. So that way he doesn't hit his pack. So he still has more supplies to help other men in the field. That's where this whole IFAC came from, was a military application because of serious trauma in the field. So how does that apply to you and me? Well, you're a hunter, sportswoman. I'm a hunter and a sportsman. Do you think there's situations where we might actually need something for serious trauma?
Well, see, now you're raising a really good point, and I was just going to get into this myself, because I always talk about being flexible and tailoring what you have with you for what you are most likely to encounter. So, for instance, if we're in a vehicle and you're driving, I think it's really important, if you're in a car accident, for instance, help will be there. Unless you're in a very remote area, most of the time in a reasonable amount of time. But what can we do in the meantime? I like to have clotting agents with me. I like to have Israeli bandages, things like that. I think stopping bleeding, that's also, I think, important for a range bag, something like that, a trauma kit. We were talking about riding horses. I'm an equestrian, and I was talking about having a way to splint, because oftentimes the most common thing you're going to come across when you're riding horses is when you have an involuntary dismount and you can have a sprain or a break. Well, if you're out there on the trail and you're going to somehow need to stabilize that and still get home. So always think about what is the most likely event that is going to happen. And then, as you mentioned earlier, look at what's happening right now. Look at the shooting in Alexandria. We had a police officer being stabbed. Is it that big of a stretch to prepare for an active shooter? It doesn't take a lot of space or a lot of weight to have something to treat traumatic injuries. Is there possibly some sort of a mini trauma kit we can carry with us? Also, is Rick with us? Did he join in on Hangouts?
No, he hasn't.
Okay. He had mentioned that he was. So is it feasible to have some sort of a mini trauma kit, say even with the tourniquet?
Well, see, that's the IFAC. So let's just kind of go over a few of the basics. Mine is a little bit more stock than probably most others. The one thing also that every soldier carries in the field, and something that we really can't carry, is every soldier has, in addition to his IFAC, he has an IV kit. So he's carrying his own IV solution, IV setup. Yeah, I just had a brain fart. Sorry about that. The catheters to start an IV. So my IFAC, I have an IV setup in it. So I can start IVs in the field if there's a serious trauma. But it should have, again, like you said, it should have Israeli bandages. They're vacuum packed. They're very small. But when you open them up, those become very large trauma bandages. I can't remember the size.
You could tell they're sealed with a vacuum seal. What exactly is an Israeli bandage, and why should everybody have one? At least one.
Well, like you said, we go to the range. I'm at the range quite a lot, and I just posted a video of us at the recent Stone Mountain machine gun shoot, and Jason was shooting a Russian machine gun. Well, there's hundreds of people around there shooting machine guns, and had there been an accident, on my body at that time, I was carrying my IFAC. So if someone was injured, I had my Israeli bandages, which, like you said, when you unseal them, they become probably a 4x10 trauma dressing. They're very thick and they're very big. So if you have someone that's shot, you're going to put that on there. You should have the clotting agents, like you said. And I've heard different versions on this. They have a granular stuff, and I've been told by surgeons that they don't like the granular stuff because they have to debride so much afterwards, and they make these gauze ones that are they look like just some gauze, but they have the clotting agent in there. So if you stuff that in a wound, whether it's a open fracture that's bleeding, see, this doesn't have to be a shooting. This could be a person falling out of a tree stand or falling off a horse. You have an open fracture, you have bleeding. It's just, or a car accident. These little trauma kits are designed to keep someone alive as the first person there till they can get someone there to get them and get them to definitive care, which is a doctor. And so you should have these clotting agents. And again, I suggest the gauze, because it takes less debriding, because they can pull the gauze out and they're done. Where if you use the granular stuff, it's packed in everywhere in a wound. So again, use the gauze.
I have those in my hunting bag, and I think I'm going to replace those. And that's
right.
Stay on top of this stuff. There's no harm in modifying what you have and taking some stuff out. I also have
watch the expiration dates. You were talking about replacing it. Watch expiration dates. Make sure they're still good. Now, are they bad at the end of the expiration date? Probably not. They're probably good for quite a while longer. But just keep up with expiration dates.
So I don't want to get into the whole thing before we get into the break, because this is going to take us to the end of the show. A lot of the prepping shows or the survival shows, hunting shows, turn into infomercials where they just start selling products. And I don't want to just get into that. So what we're going to talk about when we get back from the break is how to build our own kits. A lot of people just want to go out and buy something, but if you just go out and buy a kit, you don't really know what's in there. Now, for some of my travel packs, the easy little ones that I have, I'll have a couple of those just to throw in the car or something. But one thing I noticed, one had a zip tie on it, and I realized that that had still been on there. If my hands were bloodied, I wouldn't have been able to open that up. Anyway, this is the Wasatch Report on the Renegade Rambler Network. We're going to cut to a break and rejoin you momentarily.
He gone and painted his entire Chevy Cavalier. Camouflage. It disappears when it pulls out of his garage.
You won't disappear when you wear Tail Gunner Apparel custom camo clothing and all natural bath and body products for women and men too. And don't forget to ask about their line of custom home products and bed scarves. Look awesome and feel even better. Tail Gunner Apparel on Facebook at Tail Gunner Apparel and at tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com. That's tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com.
Camouflage ain't nothing doesn't go with camouflage. You can't blend in the country. You can't stand out in the fashion world.
The Donald is wondering why all your friends aren't listening to the Wasatch Report. Cowgirl Esquire is making prepping great again.
Should have told you by now, but I can't find the words. Oh no, if I could show you somehow, but I don't have the nerve. Oh yeah, you don't see me looking at you. How could love be so blind? Somehow you don't notice me.
Welcome back, everybody, to the third and final segment of the Wasatch Report here on the Renegade Rambler Radio Network, where we are 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. We like to look at things from a historic perspective and also just apply the concept of personal responsibility and just getting back to taking care of ourselves and not waiting for help. And that's the subject of today's show. We're talking about first aid, being our own immediate responders. And I believe we have somebody else I want to introduce on the show. First that has been with me today has been Jeff Johnson, one of the founders of the network here. And I also want to introduce from another show I used to do, my former part-time co-host, Rick the Prepper. Can you hear me, sir?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm delighted to have you back. Rick, give a quick introduction. I know you've been really busy studying and getting a degree.
Yeah, I am in the last class of my master's in Homeland Security at Penn State University, and I am a fellow prepper enthusiast with Miss Suzanne Sherman, and I'm just happy to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. Jeff and I have been discussing first aid kits, trauma kits, and how to put them together and tailor them for our specific needs. For instance, we talked about having something in the home. At the home, you want to have supplies to tend to illnesses and so forth. And Jeff also was bringing his experience as a paramedic. Jeff, something I had asked you before the show started was, in your experience as a paramedic, were there instances where you saw that individuals would have fared much better had the people they were with had some basic training and supplies with them?
It's always good to have people that are trained in basic first aid. You're going to be there before we are. As I said earlier, we may be delayed because of circumstances. Again, with a hunting situation, your hunting buddies out there hurt, you may be 20 minutes from the nearest road, and that ambulance doesn't have the means to get all their stuff into you without someone from a rescue squad to get everything loaded up, to get them back to you, to get you back to their ambulance. And that may be 40 minutes. They may be getting there. They may have to set up an LZ out there to get a helicopter there. And the helicopter may be 45 minutes away. You always have to have somebody there to help get started. And that's the immediate responders.
You know, when I first started venturing out in the woods, I would take my boys on this wagon train ride, and it was out in the middle of the Targhee Forest in Wyoming. And we got a lecture on being safe with the horses. An example they had used was an individual that was not, and an 8-year-old boy was severely injured, and it took 6 hours to get a helicopter out there to medevac him. So you have to think there can be a time when you're in a remote area. For instance, we're out there hunting. We're on either snow machines or on these, the side-by-sides. And if one of those breaks down and somebody's injured, you have to figure it can be on the outside of hours before somebody can get to you. So it's something you have to think of. Or, as Richard, what you've been studying, I'm sure, and preparing for, is the system just might be overtaxed. You could have a mass casualty situation, or in the event of a natural disaster, help simply cannot make its way to you. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. I know we're taking a very 10,000 feet approach with this, and that's good, because once we do a very high overview of it, we can kind of filter down to the nitty gritty. But there's even a situation where the current infrastructure that is in place is just not capable to adapt to our ever expanding population. I live in the DFW area, and in March of this year, there was a huge issue with the 911 system here especially in Dallas, where people would call on their cell phones, T-Mobile or AT&T, it didn't matter, and they were getting put on hold 7, 8, or 9 times, or the phone wouldn't go through. This was partly because the system was not capable of getting those calls through, and also because Dallas has had an issue of actually having enough staff to respond to 911 calls. So yes, Jeff and you have brought up excellent points about catastrophic issues, about the fact that your first responders are going to have to wait until your scene is secure. Your responsibilities, you and I like to talk about, Suzanne, all this stuff seems strange, but really what it is, it's just people taking responsibility for themselves and not having to wait. But this is something that I've been keeping a very close eye on, is the fact that our 911 system, which is antiquated, it's absolutely antiquated. It was created in an analog world with landlines. And I know you had your friend Tammy has been on when back in another program you had, and how she talked about how that whole system has made us lazy, essentially. Mm-hmm. It's made us lazy, and now it doesn't work. So people need to take these things into account. And they had this outrage. I can't believe it doesn't work. I can't believe it doesn't work. They put me on hold 7, 8 times. Well, maybe after the 3rd time, you should probably hang up and take and actually take charge of the issue. That might be an issue
Many
there.
people can't. And you brought up another point. I was talking about areas where you might be isolated or in a very remote situation, for instance, hunting or being out in the wilderness. You're bringing a perspective from where there are too many people around, where the system's simply overtaxed and the system's shut down. So it's important to remember, just because you're in an area where there are a lot of people, you might not be getting a lot of help. I mean, when I was having a conversation when I lived in California with a couple moms at my house, and we started talking about firearms, and one of them said, I don't know why anybody would ever need to have a handgun. And I said, well, let me present a situation to you. Let's say somebody kicked in our door, front door. Home invasions are pretty common out there. And the little boys were playing, all the kids were playing. I said, let's say somebody kicked down our front door and grabbed one of the kids. What would you do? And my other friend just laughed and said, call 911. Well, now compare that to the scenario that you just pointed out. Let's be really generous and say help arrived in 8-10 minutes. Imagine what a person who is truly evil can do to you in that amount of time. I guarantee, even if it's 2 minutes, that will be the slowest running 2 minutes of your life, if not the final 2 minutes.
Well, whatever situation will be over within a minute, no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, either it's going to escalate, or the person engaging will just retreat, seeing that there are people there. You talked about response times earlier in the show. In Dallas, they released their numbers, and it's funny you said 8 minutes. That's their average for a priority 1 emergency is 8 minutes and 12 seconds. For a priority 2, which is urgent, it goes from 8 minutes to 21 minutes. That is
So
the
priority 1.
average.
Give an example of priority 1.
Let's see here. The priority 1, I believe, is in regards to. They didn't actually say what the priority 1s and urgents are. I can't really speak to that. Maybe Jeff can, because
Violent crime.
Well, if it's an ongoing violent crime, that's the most high priority. They're gonna respond to that first. The priority 1s are a little lower. They're gonna take their time because the crime has already been committed. Now it's just a matter of taking the report. They're just coming to take a report. And so they slow go those to do the other ones. Problem is, if there's 4 or 5 violent crimes going on in an area at the same time, which one do they take the priority on? Yeah. I mean, so you may think yours is a real high priority, but you now are way down the line.
Perspective's a funny thing. You know, I want to do one thing really quickly too, is when we mentioned purchasing a ready-made pack versus putting one together for yourself, I recommend the latter. You know, you can get a few just to have around handy, but I think it's important to tailor them to what you're most likely going to encounter. Also consider the people that you are around, the family members that you're taking with you. What are some essentials? And I'll let you, you haven't been on long. Why don't you?
I'm gonna let him get to this, but you have to take into consideration your level of training on what you buy.
That's a great point. I mean, would I want to get a trach tube kit? I wouldn't know how to intubate somebody.
Yeah, I can buy one, but you don't want me doing it. I'll tell you that much. You'll be like, you know what? I'll be fine. Just let me choke. But I think it's great. I was listening to you guys talking about assembling one, and I'm absolutely 100% with you. When you have the prospect of looking online for one of these emergency packs, if they're 99.9% of them are garbage. It's stuff you can go to the Dollar Tree and put together. 99. It's bandages. It's topical ointment. It's wraps. I even found blue neoprene non-powdered gloves at my Dollar Tree the other day, so I bought all of them.
Yeah, I think it's very common for them to take a lot.
They're non-latex.
That's the ones I was talking about. Yes, sir.
You have latex allergy out there, so make sure you get non-latex gloves.
But like you said, you could save a lot of money putting something together like that by yourself. So let's say now we need to go above and beyond. I like to have the Israeli bandages with me. Let's talk tourniquets.
Well, tourniquets you can make out of anything.
There's a million on the market. I mean, you shared a bunch on Facebook, Suzanne. So if people want to see, there's some right on Suzanne's Facebook page. I've shared them on there. Just make sure it's a quality one. Make sure it's not made of plastic. Most of the really good ones have aluminum little arms on them that you're going to twist down. I'll just make it simple.
Yeah, Rick also mentioned that if you had to, you could make the one out of anything. I'm also a big believer in having bandanas with you in a bag. They can serve a multitude of purposes, from a tourniquet to a pressure Band-Aid to water filtration for air filtration. As many items as you can get can serve.
Yep. Can I give you my basic list real quick?
Yes, please.
Make sure you have 2 occlusive dressings. They're like a little piece of cellophane, because if it is a gunshot wound, you may have an entrance and an exit. So you need 2. And those are to keep air from going into the chest. That you don't need any special training from it. Just slap them on. Israeli bandages, I carry 2. Most IFACs, they only require 1. I carry 2 because, again, you might have a front and a back on the wound. Or the one becomes so blood-soaked, you need to add a new one. So a good tourniquet, again, mine are really good ones. They have a spot on them you have a magic marker, a permanent marker in your bag to mark on the tourniquet when you put it on, because that is a really, really important information. The doctor needs to know when you put that on, because the clock is ticking. The second that tourniquet goes on, the clock is ticking for that limb. So I
would never have thought of that. A magic marker.
Yeah.
Put a good permanent marker in there. And if you have a tourniquet, or you're made a tourniquet and you don't have the ability to mark the tourniquet like the ones I use, mark it right across their forehead. Write in permanent ink, put a big T and then the time, and they'll know that the tourniquet went on at that time. So just make sure that they have to know the clock is ticking on that. So you want those. You want good nitrile gloves that are non-latex. You want trauma shears, because you'll want it, and they're cheap. Again, like I showed you on eBay, you can find these in a refill kit. It has all the essentials real quick at a really reasonable price. And if you don't care about some expiration dates on some of the things, you can get things that are really, really cheap. And some of the expiration dates are really unimportant. Others are more critical. Like an Israeli bandage has a date on it. I mean, is it really bad at the end of 20 years? Probably not. But be aware of those dates. Trying to think of what else. Again, I have an advanced one. I have a chest decompression needle. Because if there is a chest wound, I can decompress the chest, because I've been trained in these things. These are advanced skills. You want a nasal airway. Almost forgot that one. Because if you have someone that's having trouble, that has been injured and can't breathe, it just slides. It's something very simple. Anyone can do it. It slides in. You'll have a little bit of a water-based gel to help it slide right in. And then it's a nasal pharyngeal airway. And it's just a long tube. It goes right in the nose, and it bypasses it bypasses here, so they can breathe. So those are a few of the basic items. Richard, do you have any others you want to add? This is an IFAC. This is a major trauma kit. In your car, you can carry all the other stuff. But on your person, when you're going to the range, going hunting, going backpacking, going horseback riding, when you're away from the road where you could have someone seriously injured, this is the stuff that's going to keep them alive until help can get there.
And given the events in the news and what we're seeing, this is not a Walking Dead zombie apocalypse tinfoil hat stuff. This is the new normal. This is the thing we need to be prepared for, notwithstanding the current climate. What we have, this is something that we should all be doing, regardless. And this hour has absolutely flown by. Jeff, I want to thank you and Daniel for starting this network and giving us the opportunity. You can follow us at Renegade Rambler Radio Network. We have an app for Android, and you can follow me on Facebook, facebook.com. Cowgirl Esquire. And Rick Barrett also does a blog called The Barrett Briefing, and he's going to be appearing with me on a regular basis as well. And Rick is very knowledgeable, prepper as well. And Jeff, thank you. And I'll let you close it out.
Well, that's it, folks. The inaugural show of the Wasatch Report with the Cowgirl Esquire. We're going to come up with a nickname for you there, Richard. Because we got the Rambler, we got the Renegade, we got the Cowgirl Esquire. So we need something for you now. We'll think
I've been
about
calling him the prepper.
Okay.
I mean, it works.
Okay. I'm sorry, Richard. You got in here late, and
That's okay.
We'll get you back on.
Absolutely.
This is the Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers.